Are you ready to change your life, but don't know how to start? Is your stress and worries keeping you awake at night? Have you been battling grief, anxiety, or depression all alone? Have you lost touch with your own sense of being or spirituality? Soul Free Therapies offers professional and affordable live video streaming counseling and coaching services from the comfort of your own home. Sessions offered in English, Spanish, and Portuguese. Go to our website at www.soul-free.com and book your first session today.
Hey, check out our brand new sponsor, Dynamic Solutions 2. That's the number 2. They offer a life-changing, dynamic financial solution. The finest in fast, professional, affordable credit repair. Is your credit in bad shape? Do you need a new car? Ready to buy a new house? You want to rent an apartment? Are you going to apply for a job? Any one of these activities, they're going to ask for a credit report and then check out your credit score. Let Dynamic Solutions 2 erase your negative credit remarks. They have affordable monthly prices. They accept Visa, MasterCard, PayPal options available. You go to www.dynamicsolutions, that's the number 2.com, or call 424-888-2820. 424-888-2820. Now, if you enter promo code ED or you mention Ed Opperman, you get a 10% discount. How's that? You get a free consultation, all negative items removed, get back in positive credit position. Dynamic Solutions 2, life-changing dynamic financial solutions. 424-888-2820. Tell them Ed Opperman sent you. You get a 10% discount.
Hey, you, podcast listener. This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. Take the blue pill. You wake up in your bed and go back to listening to mundane podcasts that won't challenge your religious beliefs and your so-called truths about reality, the universe, and consciousness. Take the red pill. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast, hosted by Mark Anthony Peterson, and he will show you how deep the rabbit hole goes. Event Horizon takes a walk into the paranormal with a splash of conspiracy. It's the podcast that would be born if David Icke and the X-Files had a baby. Subscribe to the Event Horizon podcast by Mark Anthony Peterson on Spreaker, iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, CastBox, Stitcher, or any of your other favorite podcast platforms. Remember, all we are offering is the truth, nothing more.
It's the Opperman Report. Join digital forensic investigator and PI Ed Opperman for an in-depth discussion of conspiracy theories, strategy of New World Order resistance, high-profile court cases in the news, and interviews with expert guests and authors on these topics and more. It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
Welcome back to the Opperman Report every Friday night, 5 p.m. Pacific Standard Time on Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, and simulcast on CJ Mars Radio, 365 Live, and also shoutcast.com starting tonight, and rebroadcast throughout the week on all those different stations. Coming up next week, we got Hart Fisher, heart attack. And we're going to have Keith Davis come on too, and we'll be telling all that kind of stories. But tonight we have Thomas Sheridan telling us some amazing stuff about the Jimmy Saville case. He's the author of Valpurgis Night, Volume 1, Puzzling People, The Labyrinth of the Psychopath. I'm probably in that book. And The Anvil of the Psyche, and Defeated Demons. He has a YouTube channel called Thomas Sheridan Arts, and he has a website called ThomasSheridanArts.com. And Sheridan is spelled Sheridan, Sheridan. But if you put in Thomas Sheridan, he pops up all over the place. Okay, bro, where'd we leave off, man? Alan Alda, and what else was it after that?
Well, after he announced on the Parkinson show, glibly and jokingly, he delivered a little girl to Buckingham Palace for Prince Philip. We find another unbelievable mind game he played with people. There was a TV show called Through the Keyhole, which is hosted by the famous journalist Sir David Frost.
Okay.
And it was basically a light-hearted afternoon TV show where they went to visit famous people's houses and apartments, and they showed you what their hobbies were, what their book collection or record collection was, and then you had to try and guess who it was. Well, they went to one of Jimmy Savile's apartments, again on a seaside location, a coast town called Eastbourne, and his house is kind of odd and strange, and I knew it was Jimmy Savile because I'd already seen the title of the YouTube clip. But he had weird ritual things, like he had 4 rubber ducks on his bed. 3 of them were yellow and 1 was pink, which is just bizarre. Like I pointed out in my book, Defeated Demons, psychopaths have very bizarre taste in music that doesn't make any sense. And his record collection was the band of the Coldstream Guards and some brass band doing Lennon and McCartney, which is very strange considering that he was there at the height of the Beatlemania, and he didn't even have a real Beatles album. But eventually he comes on and they show him, and he's wearing a T-shirt that says, I'm not kidding you, I am an animal and I eat people. That's his T-shirt. I am an animal and I eat people. And when he came out and they announced who he was, he's sitting there at Richard Frost, another Sir, 2 Sirs together, and he's David Frost, sorry, and he's talking about how he's feared in every girls' school in the country. That's what he said. How he's had thousands of girlfriends, how his legs are insured for £1 million, and he gives them to any young woman he sees and says, how would you like to stick your hand up £1 million? And it's not live on TV, and the audience are uncomfortably laughing. And then, now here's one that's truly sinister. There was another TV show on that was like a newspaper comedy weekly BBC show, hosted by a guy called Paul Merton. I saw this clip with my own eyes, and it was Jimmy Savile was on it not long before he died, where he basically boasted about having any woman, any girl in any school he wanted, and he just took her. And this was put on YouTube. I found the clip. When I went back a few months later to find the clip, the BBC had pulled, using copyright trumps, all the videos off of Savile, as many as they could, off YouTube. And that video of Savile announcing it on this TV show could not be found. Instead, and this is incredible, what I found was a clip by the host on the same show, Paul Merton, saying, there's a lot of people claim they've seen a clip off this show on YouTube that shows Jimmy Savile sitting over there saying that he did such and such with young women. It never existed. It was just somebody made up and stuck on YouTube. Now you can clearly see that Paul Merton, the guy, the host, knows he's lying, and you can see the co-hosts of the show are looking at him, and they know he's lying. This is the lengths that the BBC were going through to try and absolve themselves of their 40 years. They're 40 years now of protecting Jimmy Savile. That's what was going on.
Now, Savile also, he spent Christmas holiday at the palace?
With Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister.
Okay.
He spent something like 11 Christmases with her in her home. In fact, this leads us to the next part of the story. She was the Prime Minister when the Yorkshire Ripper, Peter Sutcliffe, was going on his murder rampage during the North. It's like we're living in, we used to watch those TV shows or read books when we were kids, like Caligula, that movie, remember that? Or the stories of ancient Rome, like Nero, or the Borgias of, Renaissance Italy. And you'd watch these shows and you say, my God, or, Vlad the Impaler, my God, isn't it amazing we don't live like that anymore? Well, the fact is, Jimmy Savile shows that was still going on among the royal and among the elite in the 1970s, 80s, 90s, and 2000s. And I'm sure it's still going on with somebody else behind the scenes. We're always conditioned to believe that these crazy things only take place in the past when they're through popular culture, when in reality, Caligula's, Nero's, and the Borgias exist with us today. They're just that we just believe that was somehow, that would never happen today. When in reality, Savile proves that it does. Now, the Yorkshire Ripper. Here's where the story really begins for me and my involvement in it. As I said at the beginning of the show, one of my favorite authors and heroes is the British journalist and investigative journalist called David A. Yallop. He wrote the book called, they wrote the book in God's Name about the assassination of Pope John Paul I by Propaganda Due, the Italian Freemasonry organization, in collusion with the mafia, because he was going to open the banks on Vatican City. And this led to a famous Freemason called Roberto Calvi, an Italian guy who was the Vatican's banker, no less, found swinging from Blackfriars Bridge in London after he banged on the door of the London Freemasonic Temple begging for refuge. Now, that book in God's Name was one of the first books that ever woke me up. And if you ever want, if people ever say to you there's no such thing as conspiracy theories, give them a copy of that book, and that will shut them up ever. Now, Yallop also wrote a book called Deliverers from Evil, The Yorkshire Ripper, The Hunt, The Arrest, The Trial, and the Full Horrific Story. This book, I still have my original copy from 1981. Yallop was very similar to what they call today an embedded journalist, a journalist who goes into the front line and works directly with the people involved in it. In his case, he was with the South and West Yorkshire Police at a time where women, mainly prostitutes, but not exclusively, were being murdered in cities in the north of England, ranging from Preston through Manchester and places like Huddersfield, Faxford and Leeds, on a corridor which I had named the 666 corridor, because it runs, the murders have taken place between the M6, the M61 and the M62. These three motorways, these three highways, if you could call them, through this heavily populated part of England. The murders began in summer 1975, and they continued until the last victim in 1980. And these are officially the ones attributed to him. A guy was arrested called Peter Sutcliffe, eventually a truck driver, and charged with these killings, at least these 20 murders, 13 officially, but he probably would have killed like 20, that many people believe, that he couldn't prove them all, and maybe even more. Now, Yallop was in the investigation, inside the investigation. This is the journalist. And in his book, Deliverers from Evil, he points out that this was a murder investigation that was deliberately thrown into chaos. That there was definitely an accomplice working, maybe at least one accomplice, working with Peter Sutcliffe, their killer. However, there was another. There had to have been another, because not this guy on his own could not have the strength to hold down these women and kill them the way he did. Even if he was a psychopath, it's very difficult. You know, a Scotland Yard detective told me this, that it's very difficult to kill even a young child, because they have the instinct to survive, and they're fighting death. They will unleash incredible amounts of adrenaline. And that's why he told me that he does not believe that Sutcliffe was killing on his own. Now, how Saville comes into this. One of the victims, a woman called Irene Richardson, she was a poor, unfortunate soul. She was practically homeless. She was 28 years old, was practically found dead in Saville's back garden on Soldiers Field behind his apartment in Leeds in I think it was June 1977. It was either spring or summer 1977. Now, this is what tipped me off. How Sutcliffe killed these women was he used a ball-peen hammer, which is a hammer that has a ball on the back rather than a claw. You know, a regular claw hammer we call move nails. The ball hammer is used for shaping metals. It's a very specific hammer that a metal worker uses. They were killed with this hammer. What did Saville say on the Louis Theroux interview? Women are brain damage. That's how I linked Sutcliffe's accomplice. To my amazement, not long after I was posting about this on Facebook, I was saying to people, I think Saville was connected to Sutcliffe. The Daily Mirror newspaper in England shows a photograph of Jimmy Saville standing next to the Yorkshire Ripper in Broadmoor maximum security prison / hospital, shaking hands with the famous British boxer Frank Bruno, another bizarre, interesting character, which I don't want to go into much into tonight. There was the direct link. Then it transpires that back in the 90s, while Saville was being investigated for something else, the cop asked, the copper who was interviewing Saville said that Saville boasted about, if they wanted the Yorkshire Ripper, all they had to do was knock on my front door and meet us. And then the copper said to Saville, Jimmy, what do you mean by that? And he says, I have a few friends in the forensic labs up there, if you know what I mean. Saville had at least one person found dead in his backyard. He knew Sutcliffe personally. Yallop speculated that there was a second killer. He had to have been a high-profile killer, and he had to be someone that the police investigation was deliberately wrecking. After the murder of one of the women, Margaret Thatcher, the then Prime Minister, personal friend of Saville, said she had enough of hearing about, wait to hear this one, these wretched women being killed.
Oh my God.
That's how she described it. Went up to Leeds, took charge of the investigation, and then suddenly, out of the blue, this guy Sutcliffe is arrested. And that's the end of that. Closed and shut down. Yallop finishes the book saying there was definitely someone out there that would have the same blood type as another person, and it turns out that Saville has the same blood type too, and was also, and this is really significant, a secretor. Now, what a secretor is someone who passes blood through either urine or semen. Sutcliffe didn't do that, but one of the killers did. It transpired that Saville was a secretor. It was admitted indirectly on the Louis Theroux show because he washed the same pair of underpants every single day. He was been conditioned in a ritualistic manner from the 70s to keep washing his underpants to destroy the evidence of his blood and his other body fluids found on these women. And one more thing, it turns out now, and this is mainstream, again, that Saville was asked to present, and I don't know if it ever happened, a dental impression by the South Yorkshire police at the time of the killings because the teeth marks did not match Sutcliffe. So therefore, someone in the South Yorkshire police knew that Saville was somehow connected to the killings.
A couple of questions. Now, what you said that he was being investigated for other crimes. That was one question. Another question is, do we have a DNA sample of Saville that we could now compare back? There must be some evidence withheld from these victims back in with the Sutcliffe case.
Yeah, but they haven't reopened it yet because it hasn't come out. The Sutcliffe thing hasn't come out yet. It will come out. It will be confirmed, but they're leaking these things out bit by bit. They're conditioning the public. They're getting them ready for the big one. And the big one will be that Saville was a serial killer. But they will do, they'll have no, there will be, what we need now, although it's a difficult one, is to try and get the families of the people who were murdered. And I remember it's a long time ago now, the last victim was back in 1980, to try and come out and ask for this investigation to be reopened. It's very easy to just all blame it on Sutcliffe, but there's so many other things that does.
Sutcliffe is still alive, or Sutcliffe is dead?
Oh, he's still alive, and he's still alive. And he's still enjoying life in Broadmoor.
Have you tried to contact him?
Pardon?
Have you tried to contact him?
I have indeed. I wrote a letter to him. I don't know. I never got he did not allow access to the internet because they'll use it to try and pick up women and stuff.
Sure.
But I never got an answer back. I probably won't. But what I did find out was that soon after I was put on a watch list by the British airports.
Yeah, that'll happen too. Yeah. Now, what about you said that he was a suspect in some other crimes that he was being investigated for. What were those other allegations?
We're talking about Saville now.
Saville, yeah.
There was another murder that took place in a town that I'm actually quite familiar with, called Hebden Bridge, in between Yorkshire and Manchester. There was a young girl called Leslie Jo Rimmer was found in the canal where she'd been strangled. Saville had been living in a caravan. Now we're talking about a multi-millionaire who could stay in the best hotels, was living very close by in a mobile home, in a trailer, what you call in the United States, in the grounds of a pub, and he was the only one in the whole area of all the males, although he'd been seen wandering around the hills at night, where this girl was seen, this 14-year-old girl was seen. And a friend of mine who was a friend of this girl was murdered, said that they all used to stay in a house that belonged to a rich family, and they were young teenage kids. They used to drink beer and smoke pot. But the rich family, they were just poor kids who were friends of a rich family. And Leslie Joe Rimmer was one of these kids. And Saville must have been alerted to her because she was basically came from a troubled home. There's definitely no one in the family was involved. And the police took evidence, statements, and prints from 3,000 men in the small rural area. Everyone, including the vicar, the minister in the church, but they did not ask Jimmy Saville.
Oh my God.
And the minister of the church, everyone except the main suspect was a suspect. And Saville sneaked out of the area, and 2 years ago, one of the parish leaders of one of the Church of England Protestant churches asked for the case to be reopened and DNA of Saville taken to see if they showed up in any of the autopsies. This is another one that Saville was involved in, and it goes on further. Saville was involved in, as I said, numerous charities. One of them included a home in the islands of Jersey, in the Channel Islands, which is a series of islands that belong to the UK, which are off the coast of France. Now, this home, Saville, according to an investigator presenting very good evidence, you're not going to believe it, I'll tell you this one.
Okay.
The Prime Minister prior to Margaret Thatcher was a guy called Edward Heath. He was a paedophile. Notorious and very well documented paedophile. He had a taste for young prepubescent boys. He had a yacht called the Morning Star, Lucifer. Okay, the yacht, Saville would procure young boys for him from this home in Jersey. These were young runaway boys, or orphans, troubled kids. Ted Heath, the Prime Minister of Britain, would take them out on the yacht with Saville, do what they did to them, unspeakable things, throw the bodies overboard. That went on.
How do we know that? How do we know that, though? Where do we get that information from?
Well, this evidence has not gone mainstream yet, but there's tremendous evidence of people who worked with these people and knew them, have come forward bit by bit over the years. There's a guy in the UK called Bill Maloney. He runs this thing called Pie and Mash Films. He's actually quite a hero in many ways. He's been chasing politicians down the street and calling them pedophiles, and these fellas have actually been arrested eventually.
Yeah. And
these people have compiled vast amount of evidence from people who were involved in politics, civil servants, even policemen who were investigating this, who belong this massive elitist pedophile/murder ring, wide open. There's other things as well. There was the Irish police were investigating something that was happening at the border between Northern Ireland, which is part of the UK, and Southern Ireland, which is where I live, involving boys that were being moved across the border by the security forces from a place called Kincora. Kincora was a boys' home, again, another place in Belfast. And they found out that MI5 was transporting these young boys into a ring of network of paedophiles among Freemasons and Orangemen, which included, incredible as it sounds, the Queen's brother, Lord Mountbatten, who lived in a Gothic castle very close to where I live called Classy Bon, who was allegedly blown up by the IRA by a bomb in 1980, but it's never, I'm starting to wonder now if Mountbatten was ever killed. And a young boy was on the boat with him who was found dead in the water. Again, this is what was going on. This is what these people...
I remember the Mountbatten explosion. Was there any explanation as to the young boy?
He was a young boy from the area who was supposed to be tied up with the fishing boat, but apparently, according to the locals, many of whom I know, Mountbatten seemed to have a young boy going out with him on the boat all the time.
Oh my God.
And these were shipped across the border from Kincora. This is now mainstream. The Irish the Irish Times are blowing this story open bit by bit. MI5, British Secret Service, who also took out Jill Dando, the politician, the TV presenter who figured out that Saville was the head of this ring, was heavily involved.
How do we know Dando was taken up by MI5?
Oh, it was a professional hit, absolutely. Two things. One, when it first broke, they tried to make out it was the Serbian Secret Service, because that was at the time that the whole thing was going on with Serbia. That a Serbian Secret Service, a guy wearing a suit carrying a revolver with a silencer, pushed her in a perfect hit, pushed her down on the ground and put put a bullet in the back of her head, killing her instantly. It's now come out in the papers that it was the British Secret Service. That's out in the open now. Okay. This is what's out in the paper. So this is not speculation. Again, this is out. And this is how far things have moved, and so quickly they have moved in this very, very short time. It basically comes down to a network of hardcore pedophiles at the very height of British society. A number of them serial killers into necrophilia, and in the middle of it all, the kind of like the mad conductor at the center of this orchestra was a TV presenter and radio DJ called Jimmy Saville. He connects to everything. And Saville was, even the way, I'll give you an example of the games he used to play. During the height of the Sutcliffe, Yorkshire Ripper serial killer, hysteria, and it was hysteria. A tape was sent to the West Yorkshire Police, I think it was. It was inside a cassette single by a singer called Andrew Gold. The voice claimed to be that of the Yorkshire Ripper, talking with a very specific north of England accent, what's called a Geordie accent. There's people up in the northeast of England speak with this accent. I'll give you an example of someone who has the accent. It's Brian Johnson, the singer from AC/DC. It almost sounds like an Irish accent or a Scottish accent, but it's English. And this cassette was delivered to the cops, and it was a cassette single. At the time, cassette singles were very, very rare. Generally, they were only given to DJs because they were useful for playing the songs on the radio. So you could actually, they could put the cassette in. Now, this is not long after that Irene Richardson's body was found back basically in Andrew Gold's, in Sutcliffe's in Saville's backyard. Now, the single had the voice saying, emitting it, and it was also a letter. Now, this is what's so bizarre about this Yorkshire Ripper thing. This became almost like a psyop in itself. This wasn't long after Thatcher got involved, where loudspeakers would be set up in factories and in shops and even in the city centres of these towns where the murders were taking place. And in a Big Brother kind of weird, creepy way, like a horror movie, this tape of the serial killer that came out of claiming to be the Yorkshire Ripper in this voice, which was played all the time to people to put them in a state of terror. And people it got so bad that women were starting to believe that their husband or their boyfriend was the Yorkshire Ripper. And this was all part of the psyop to throw the chaos throw the investigation into complete and utter madness and chaos. To create the most wildest goose chase it's been called in criminal history, looking for somebody. Now, years later, a guy in the north of England claimed that it was him that made the tape, and it was him that wrote the letter. I am not convinced. I think that guy who claimed he was that was one of these kind of nutcases who, they pretend they killed somebody. And there's always like a serial killer goes on, or there's a mass crime. There's always a lunatic looking for attention who shows up and pretends that they were doing it. I think this guy was one of them, and he had enough time to mimic the accent on the tape and to actually fake the handwriting. If you look at the handwriting of the letter, it looks like somebody struggling to put a different handwriting on than they normally speak with. It's almost kind of labored, and that I believe that was Saville. And the cassette tape, it sounds like someone who doesn't speak with a natural Geordie accent. It's someone who's faking it. Now, Saville, after he was involved in a lot of this stuff, fled to his mother's apartment in a town called Scarborough, which is a very dark place. This is a place that's notorious for police corruption and everything. And posted then, it was only a short journey there north to Newcastle where the tape was posted from. And in the tape he says, I don't get up north much. Now, why would someone who lives in that place say, I don't get up north much? Because this guy who confessed to the crime said that he'd always lived up north. So it was somebody in the south.
But the guy who's confessing to making the tape, he's not confessing to doing the murders. He was confessing to a hoax, of hoaxing the tape?
To the hoax, yeah. Confessing to the hoax, yeah. But Saville is I'm still convinced is the person on that tape.
Right.
For the simple reason that this guy got a cassette single that was only distributed among DJs. And this guy was a nobody. This is the kind of thing that went on.
Right.
And the police encouraged this wild goose chase. Because the Aleph was saying that every time they came near who the killers may have been, the killers now, plural, the police threw it into chaos. Another thing was that currently one of Saville's buddies, another no-talent BBC welfare case from Top of the Pops, called Dave Lee Travis, is currently back on trial again.
Right.
He is the spitting image of Phil Sutcliffe at that period. Now, there was an identity kit, remember the old police identity kits where they used to get people described, people who escaped, they saw someone who looked like they might have been the killer, what did his eyes look like, and they used to have these old photographs where they'd stick everything together and build an identity kit photo. Well, they got so many descriptions were put together and they built this face and this look. And the guy looks like Dave Lee Travis. Now, the police did not want to release this, okay? Now, Dave Lee Travis is now up as a sex predator. He's being charged with this at the moment. He was on Top of the Pops, he was a friend of Saville, and he hung out the same part of England at the same time. The police were annoyed because the media managed to one of the policemen who probably were figuring out that the senior detectives in the case were actually trying to destroy the case, snuck out to the media the photographs of the identity kit of this killer. And it looked, one of them in particular, but all of them really do, look more like Dave Lee Travis at that time than they look like Sutcliffe. That's another bizarre thing. And I posted a picture on my Facebook page tonight of Saville and Sutcliffe at a BBC Christmas party where they're over at Turkey and Dave Lee Travis is holding a big carving knife and making like a wild killer gesture as he's stabbing the turkey.
But that's you made a mistake. You didn't mean to say Sutcliffe just then, right?
Oh, sorry. I meant Dave Lee Travis. Okay. Mistake. I'm sorry. It's all. But I believe that Sutcliffe was involved, but he was almost a fall guy for a team of killers that were probably BBC DJs. Look how many of these creatures have actually gone to prison or been exposed as paedophiles after their death. Just about all of them. The top DJs at the time in the BBC, nearly all of them have been busted or exposed as paedophiles, including a guy called Jonathan King, who was, when you hear this one, who was when he went down for being a paedophile back in the 1990s, who paid his bail money, an unknown office clerk by the name of Simon Cowell.
Oh, shit. You gotta be kidding me, man.
All in the papers, all out in the open.
And has he made a statement about that? Why?
Oh, he said nothing about it. But it's come out that Simon Cowell, when he was an unknown, quote-unquote, office clerk, paid £65,000, which is a nice chunk of money back in the 1990s, to pay the bail money of a serial paedophile DJ / record producer, Jonathan King. I mean, we are living in the Borgia days, so Simon Cowell is caught up in this as well.
Now what is Cowell's connection to Saville?
Well, he probably must have known him when he was there.
Yeah,
Cowell is another strange one. So he goes from being a clerk at a record company to being the most powerful person in music in the world. How did that happen?
Not just music, TV now too.
Yep. And there's another connection. I mean, wow. Simon Cowell, they all knew what was going on. And I mean, it's never been, he has said nothing about it, Simon Cowell, about paying off King's bail money. Now, King turned out to be an absolute predator. What he would do is, and this is interesting, writing this to Cowell, is he would promise fame and fortune to up-and-coming boy bands. This kind of thing. And then would basically rape these young boys and then discard them. And when he was finally busted, I mean, he was so bad when he was finally busted, Cowell paid bail money at first, and then he went down for it anyway and went to prison. I think he's out of prison now. And when he was sentenced, he said that in decades to come, he would be seen the same way Oscar Wilde is seen now. Wow. That there's nothing wrong with having sex with children. And it doesn't end there. I mean, it just, this thing just goes on and on and on. This is what I was saying about, like, when people say, have things ended? You know, are we seeing any fruits of this alternative conspiracy movement? Well, by God, it established stuff we are. And I have to say, the credit even goes to people like David Icke, who even was talking about Saville a good while ago, although he wasn't getting full out there about it. But he was definitely talking about Ted Heath and other people. And we are now seeing the fruits of this. We're seeing it manifested, and it's coming. We're actually, I actually do believe this is seismic. It is seismic because if you look at the comments of the newspaper articles about these stories, people are, like ordinary people in the UK are literally, they're ready for the worst revelations. It's,
but are they,
pardon?
Are they standing up and demanding arrests, demanding investigations, or are they just kind of, because, you know, with Michael Jackson too, people are just kind of, they joke about it. Are they joking about it? And now a word from our sponsors.
Have you ever thought about opening your own mobile cart or kiosk business? Maybe the facility you manage could establish new revenue by adding coffee, food, or retail services. Cart King International can be the answer to your needs. Cart King is a North American designer and manufacturer of the finest mobile coffee, food, and retail carts and kiosks. Cart King has been working with clients and corporations across North America for 20 years, providing innovative designs, custom manufacturing, and timely delivery. Carts and kiosks are fun, and so are the dozens of designs on our website. Please visit us today at www.cart-king.com or just call us at 1-877-986-7771 and get your sales rolling.
PureSoapFlakes.com, 218-568-2525. Have you ever heard of Castile Soap? Pure Soap Flake Company handcrafts fine soap bars, laundry powder, and concentrated soap flakes using organic vegetable oils from their northern Minnesota facility. Bathe your body and wash your clothes with pure soap products that are free of fragrance, GMOs, palm oil, sodium lauryl sulfate, and synthetic additives. Keep it clean, folks. Pure Soap Flake Company products are kind to living creatures and sensitive skin, safe for drains and waterways, and work great in high-efficiency washers and top and front-loading machines. They have a little promotion going on. Contact them to order some soap. Mention the Opperman Report. You're going to get a free gift. They're going to send a little extra soap, travel size, soap bars and laundry soap, cleaning soap flakes. I've been using that stuff all day long today. Great stuff. Order today at puresoapflakes.com or give them a call, 218-568-2525, 218-568-2525. Pure Soap Flake Company is a proud member of the Handcrafted Soap and Cosmetic Guild.
Tina Helmuth is writing an ongoing series of fact-fiction books that boldly takes on today's most heinous crimes, the abduction, sexual trafficking, and cannibalization of our children. Suffer the Little Children, The Wrath of the Father, and Unbreakable. Deeply researched and mixed with the supernatural, good versus evil makes these thrillers hard to put down, shining a light on the root cause of these crimes and introducing a spiritual solution. Justice will be served. Available at lulu.com in paperback or ebook.
It's the Opperman Report. And now, here is investigator Ed Opperman.
standing up and demanding arrests, demanding investigations, or are they just kind of, because, with Michael Jackson, too, people are just kind of, they joke about it. Are they joking about it?
No, they're not joking about it. It's gotten very dark, there is a lot of anger out there, and people want to know more. It's not dying. Someone said to me tonight, and it's true, the mainstream folks are ready for this, and the journalists in the mainstream are giving it to them. And you could speculate, okay, there's all kinds of other reasons that they're trying to normalize paedophile, but they can't, because so much of it involves murders and criminality and killing.
It's vital that the serial killing comes out, because they do tend to joke about the pedophilia and the child rape, but you can't joke about serial killings. Anyway, real quick, let me take a break here and read some commercials, because we got to pay the bills. InfinityHomePlans.com. Okay, this is Mike Gray over at InfinityHomePlans.com. Check out their website. You can go on there. You can find home plans and design services. They can have 3D and 2D architectural services. They offer a multitude of products, including stock home plans, 2D digital drawing sets, 3D models, renderings, and more. That is InfinityHomePlans.com. Mike Gray, give him a call. Tell him I sent you. Then you got Pacific West Bamboo. This is good old Amanda over at the Pacific West Bamboo, 503-839-8126. Any kind of bamboo is the best product you can use to make flooring. It's the cheapest, most durable flooring you can buy. Any kind of construction project you got where you think you need bamboo, no matter where you live in the country, get a hold of Amanda at Pacific West Bamboo, because she's like a broker in this kind of bamboo, wholesale, retail, all over the place. 503-839-8126. I can vouch for this woman. This woman's a big supporter of our show, and I can tell you that if you got a bamboo problem, call up Amanda. Email revealer.com. All kinds of services over there. If you need to locate somebody, your long-lost relatives, an old girlfriend or something like that, they do people searches. The online infidelity investigation, you could trace people back to online dating websites. Computer forensics, cell phone forensics, asset searches, locates. And we're starting to expand into judgment recovery, okay? So give us a call, 800-448-0772, email revealer.com. And we're back with Thomas Sheridan with probably some of those most fascinating stories we've ever had on this show in a situation of breaking news. So, man, okay, we got about not even 20 minutes. We got about 16, 17 minutes. Unless you want to stay up like a half hour after. We're going to take some calls. We got 17 minutes exactly. Unless you want to hang out for a little bit after, no pressure. It's up to you. But
I'll stay for the calls.
I love you, man. I knew you would. I knew you would, man. But thank you. Yeah, this is great stuff. Oh my God.
It's important to get these stories out and hear as many people around the world hearing them. It's important American people hear this, because this is what happens when absolute power takes over any country and is unbridled and has the media and everything to do its work and keep its secrets quiet. This is how sick and how evil and twisted it gets. And that's what makes this the story. I knew that when the Saville thing broke, I knew this would be the story. Forget all the other conspiracies. This was the one out there that would actually damage an actual government and an actual control system, and maybe get us to somewhere decent again. I knew this was it, and it looks like the mainstream are on side with us. They're ready to go with this. That's what I'm saying. It's a horrible story. It's dark, but there's a lot of positives too. Yeah. We're winning. We're winning.
Now, what about his connections? When I was Googling, looking for a picture for you to put up on the blog, the Opperman Report blog, I noticed that there's a lot of pictures of Saville with the Catholic priests and bishops and big shots in the Catholic Church. Now, what do we have there?
Well, he claimed to be a devout Catholic, although there's not much proof he ever went to Mass or church on a regular basis. He was very heavily involved in the Catholic Church. He was very heavily I'm talking about the upper echelon of the Catholic Church.
Yeah.
he was very involved in pushing this idea if he was a Catholic. In fact, when he died, they laid him out in a hospital. I think it was in Leeds, and they had this big crucifix beside him. And if you see the photographs, he literally was laid in state and almost nothing to his coffin, but he was literally laid in state, and he was put there in a very kind of like, it looked like Dracula's tomb. I'm not kidding.
Really? But none of these people like Prince Charles and them, they didn't come down because by then the scandal had already been out?
Well, no, when he died, they were all talking about how wonderful he was. People, all these phonies like Stephen Fry, the ultimate cultural Marxist, all these other people were all, what a wonderful man, including an individual called Esther Rantzen, who was she was probably the biggest female TV presenter of that period in the 70s and 80s. And wait to hear this one, she was in charge of an organization called Childline. Childline was a telephone number that children who were being abused sexually or otherwise could call up and then could be investigated and the child could be protected. She was the head of this, right? She was amazingly close buddies with Saville at the time. It was well known in the BBC, and many presenters, including ones I don't know these names in America, but Bill Oddie was a big TV presenter. He's come out and said everyone knew Saville was up to it. Everyone knew he was up to it. She was the head of the biggest child protection agency in the UK, and she was friends with Saville. And it's now coming out and being speculated that she was actually a pimp. That she was actually a pimp when they would rescue these children from these abusive places. They were handed over to these major pedophiles. This is what was going on. And when she was literally surrounded, she was very quick to call anyone a pedophile, right? Mm-hmm. They were poor and working class. But the biggest pedophiles in the BBC all around her, loads of whom have now been sentenced or have court cases, such as Rolf Harris and Saville. She said nothing. And that's all Childline was. It was like a big pimping service or something like that. That's all it could have been. It could have been, allegedly, I'd say that. It could be nothing else. It certainly wasn't protecting children. And God, what a horrific thought to think that children who were probably being molested were calling this organization, and the head of it was probably getting their phone numbers and bringing them to someone else. We'll probably never find that one out.
Well, you know what? I had Detective Jim Rothstein on the show, who talks about, in fact, he investigated the Protestant church as well in the Son of Sam case. And he calls those groups, he calls candy stores, because that's where these pedophiles, all these group homes and these shelters for kids and stuff like that, they call them candy stores, and that's where the pedophile rings go in there and pick up kids. It's organized.
Yeah, Boys Town in America is a famous one. Yeah,
exactly.
And they build mythologies around themselves, like, even the Holly song, "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother," beautiful song. But it's about Boys Town, which is the revelations came out in that. Conspiracy of Silence, I think, was the name of the film that BBC made, Granada Television, I think it was, in the UK, made about the Boys Town home, that they found that basically they were feeding young boys as far up to the White House.
Oh, yeah.
And it was pulled the night before broadcast. Definitely a film you should watch. But so it goes on in the US too. And so here was this one, Esther Rantzen, basically in charge of protecting children and giving them the Saville. Now, another one that's amazing, and it's great, like, we live in a fantastic time where people can pull out their old VHS tapes and find something. The Sex Pistols, the punk band, the first, like, big punk band, the Sex Pistols.
Yes.
They appeared on a TV show. Now, it wasn't just Saville who was, like, raping girls and young boys at the TV stations. It was all the presenters, not all, but large numbers of the presenters were doing it, because it was just seen that anyone who came into the TV studio was fair game. There was a TV show that they became famous for called, with a guy called Bill Grundy. It was a sort of like a dinner time chat show in London. And the Sex Pistols, including a couple of girls, one of whom was Susie Sue, from later on become Susie and the Banshees, were in the studio. And of course, what happened was he said something to one of the girls, and he never thought about that until in recent times, where he said, and these were all young kids at the time, including the Sex Pistols, they're all like 17, 18. he said to one of the girls, she said something like, "Oh, I'm a big fan of you. I'm delighted to meet you." And he said something, the old guy says to her, the presenter, Bill Grundy, says, "Oh, really? Well, I'll be seeing you backstage later on." And Steve Jones, one of the Sex Pistols, the guitar player, and he's only a young kid at the time, he goes, "You dirty F word." And Grundy goes, "What do you mean by that?" And then they all start abusing Grundy. They were thrown off the air and they were vilified. A tape recently came out of Johnny Rotten. And this is amazing. These punk rockers were portrayed as the enemy of England, the enemy of morality, the enemies of family values. And yet here's an 18-year-old Johnny Rotten saying to a person, "I want to kill Jimmy Savile" on tape. And the woman saying, "Why?" "Because he gets up to unspeakable acts at the BBC along with the rest of them." Right. So here were the punk rockers who were actually the voice of decency and morality, and they were the ones being vilified by the establishment.
Yeah, I heard that tape this week, when I was researching the show.
Yeah, and he was only a kid at the time. But they were the only voices standing up against it, and that was the real reason that the BBC wouldn't let God Save the Queen be the number one single and struck it off the charts and wouldn't let them on Top of the Pops.
So they were never on Top of the Pops then, right?
No. And even though the single was number one, even though God Save the Queen was number one, they did not let them on the charts and they struck them off. There was like a line where they were number one.
Yeah. What about the Stones with the Saville?
Well, it's interesting. In that tape, Johnny Rotten also says, "I'd like to kill Mick Jagger too." Well, let's talk about the Stones here. Okay, I don't know if there was a connection between him and Saville, but the Stones were involved with some very peculiar and dodgy people, such as Kenneth Anger.
Right.
And there were, there's famous stories that they were recording one of the albums at the Sympathy for the Devil in this chateau in southern France, and some of the stories are incredible. Like Keith Richards was asleep in his room. When he woke up the next morning, the door had been nailed shut, and the door had been painted gold. And Anger had told him that he had done it during the night as a spirit form, and these kinds of things. And they were very heavily involved with him. And this is where all this goat head soup and all this Sympathy for the Devil and all this stuff came from Kenneth Anger. We know Anger was a big time occultist. And so there was a connection to Saville. I haven't discovered it yet, other than probably through him introducing them somewhere. But it's there. It'll be through the Kenneth Anger stuff, in through that network. Yes.
What about the Who? One of the members of the Who was arrested. Didn't they find child pornography on his computer?
Yeah, Peter Townsend. He's an absolute strange character. I mean, it's kind of difficult to deal with this because I'm a big fan of the Who, and I know what you mean. I know it's difficult, but yeah, he went to a website and he bought. The police bust you only if you buy images. Because people can accidentally stumble on sites, right. But he bought images. He actually purchased them. That's when they bust you. If you actually pay for the images with your credit card or something like that. And that's what happened to him. And he claimed he only did it for research. And, I don't know about him. I've heard people say things about him, and, it hasn't come, but he's definitely a peculiar and strange individual. I mean,
did you know that here in the U.S., they did an investigation at the Pentagon, and I think it was 5,000 employees at the Pentagon had purchased child pornography with their credit cards.
Oh yeah, I covered that in my first book, Puzzling Pete.
Yeah. That was covered up.
Yeah, that was big time. That did come out. That was covered. Even the New York Times did a great investigation into it. Speaking of Townsend, there's that great. I mean, it's a great song from Quadrophenia. Out of My Brain on the 515, and the first lyric that Townsend sings is like girls of 15, sexually knowing. So it goes back a long time in him, unfortunately.
All right, we got 5 minutes left. The number to call in is 702-605-4894, or you could Skype in at ed.opperman. We're going to drop the Studio A Revolution Radio server in 5 minutes, but we'll still be on cjmarsradio.com, and you can go to the chat room over at cjmarsradio.com. So while we're still on both stations, Thomas, is there anything you want to leave us with before we go to the after show?
No, I would just say thank you for this opportunity to like bring this story to people in America, because it's very important that people in the United States know these things, because it's happening in all our countries, and it's happening with the upper echelon of society. And we should not be afraid of tackling these stories, because this is the nearest we'll get to revolution in our lifetime. This is how it'll happen. And there are forces now in the mainstream that have swung in behind us. So it may seem like, oh, we've been in this kind of alternative world for a long time now and nothing ever happens. But the Saville story is proof it does happen, and we can win, and we are winning. And, it's just like you do have to look at the dark shadow in order to find the light. And I believe now we're finding the light. We're going to get more and more police, more and more journalists are going to speak up, and we're going to win this. I know we are.
Well, okay, man, from your lips to God's ears, because it does seem to me that the thread through these elites, is Satanism, is child molestation, is human sacrifice, it's blood sacrifice over and over and over again with these people. And they do seem to obtain some kind of power from it. So I would just hope that we could all. Now, what about your faith? Do you have any kind of a faith in God or?
I'm not quite an atheist. I'm probably an agnostic with a small a, but I do believe that there are magical forces and supernatural powers because, since I started this Saville stuff and went public with it, I've had very strange experiences. I've had what I would call psychic attacks, and
right.
I've had them. I did a broadcast on my old radio show. If you can look up on YouTube, it's called the 666 Killer on Saville, and I broadcast that night, and there's bizarre sounds all over it whenever I mention Saville's name. I even got like goosebumps here now even talking about it. The next day my internet went down. I called up the phone guy, and the internet connection box, the inside of the circuits had been completely fried. While I was researching other things, I've had I've definitely been psychically attacked over this. There are dark forces. I went from when I started going out there, but, educating people in psychopathology, I was probably almost an atheist. I would actually say now, if you wanted to be my honest opinion of what Saville and people like that are, they're shadows of demons that have been cast upon this earth.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I expose this kind of stuff as well, and I'm under attack all the time. But I have a faith in Jesus Christ, man. I believe that the blood of Jesus has protected me. Otherwise, I think I'd be under the prison or under the graveyard right now.
Well, whatever you can grab.
Yeah.
I always remember that story of World War I, where even atheist soldiers and Protestant soldiers would get Catholic holy medals just because they believed that something would give them power. In my case, I do believe that I do kind of feel very connected to the Nordic archetypes of that kind of thing, even if they're not real beings or anything like that. But there's a strength in calling down a force of decency that can actually protect you, even if it's not real. It still gives you strength.
Okay, listen to that. Okay, the show's over. Okay, so we're going to do a little after show. We're going to have Thomas Sheridan. It's like 3 o'clock in the morning over there, so be kind and call in 702-605-4894. I got links to all of his books are on the Opperman Report blog. So you can go there and click on the links and pick up the books and support the good work this guy's doing. We'll see you guys next week with Heart Fishing. And now a word from our sponsors. EmailRevealer.com. People ask me all the time, hey, Ed, are you still a private investigator? I sure am. Go to emailrevealer.com. We handle adoption investigations, infidelity investigations, where you give us your spouse's email address. We trace it back to online dating websites, catch them cheating online. Email tracing, locate or identify somebody from as little as an anonymous email address. Someone owe you money? Back child support? We can find that deadbeat, locate his hidden assets, locate his hidden bank accounts, find his current place of employment, and even assist you in obtaining a judgment and recover that judgment for you. Emailrevealer.com, digital forensics, computer forensics, cell phone forensics, recover deleted text messages, create a report that you can use in court. Emailrevealer.com, 800-572-9762. OppermanReport.com. Hey, do you like what you're hearing? Do you like the work that you see us doing here at Opperman Report? You can support that work by becoming a member at OppermanReport.com. And as you have access to over 200 exclusive shows and interviews that you can't find on YouTube or Spreaker or iHeart or iTunes or KYAH. You can't find them anywhere else online, exclusive to our member sections, to our members. Also, too, there's images, videos, documents, court docs, a lot of content there at OppermanReport.com. And it's the memberships that support the Opperman Report and allow us to play these shows for free on Friday nights and Saturday nights on all the stations you hear us on. You can also make a donation at OppermanReport.com. If you want to support the show and become a member, I can give you a discount. I'll give you 13 months for $65 if you email me directly at OppermanReport@gmail.com. And don't forget, you can hear your ad played here on the Opperman Report, reach hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people on a daily basis because the show is repeated every day all over the world. Contact me at OppermanReport@gmail.com and I'll give you a good deal on advertising rates.